Chapter 2 concerns the managerial communication process, and we're going to talk about a number of things in this chapter. It's probably one of the most important chapters because it's the framework through which you should look at all the other chapters within this book. And it's one of the ways, if you look at the pieces that go into this process and into the communication model, hopefully it will help you understand and become a better manager by understanding all the ways that you can miscommunicate. The learning objectives are describe the levels of the managerial communication, explain the main components of the communication process model, discuss barriers to communication in the communication process, and identify ways to improve the communicative process. Basically, you're going to learn the background or the foundations of communication in this chapter. Interpersonal communication occurs inside of you. It's what your thoughts are. Interpersonal communication is a dyad. It's between two people. So it's like with you and your boss or you and a subordinate. A group is when there's more than three. And then organizational is when you have to communicate with your entire organization, everyone within it. And then intercultural requires a little bit more knowledge because you're dealing with people from different cultural backgrounds and possibly different language backgrounds. There are a number of cultural nonverbals. And nonverbals are things that we see, word choices, what people look like, whether they smile, what does a smile really mean, outward signs. And these are things that tell us whether or not we can believe verbals. Basically, nonverbals are always believed before verbals are. However, in different cultures, the same kind of expressions may mean entirely different things. So it becomes very, very difficult to decide whether or not a nonverbal is in fact believable or not when you're dealing interculturally. One of the first things we're going to look at is chronemics. And chronemics is attitudes towards time. And one of the things we know is there's basically two types of people that keep time. There's the monochronic people and the polychronic people. And in the U.S., we're basically monochronic people, although we think we're polychronic people. There's not much evidence to the truth of that. And all you have to do is think of people trying to text and drive and how many accidents in the last few years have been caused because of this phenomenon. Some of the differences in time systems: monochronic do one thing at a time. They like to work on one task at a time. They really don't like to be multitasking. They take time commitments seriously and value promptness. They are committed to a task. Basically, they will finish anything they begin. They believe in deadlines for doing that. And they show respect for private property. They really don't like to lend or borrow items. And they're very accustomed to short-term relationships. Now, if you look at this in comparison to polychronic people, they like to do many things at once and generally are pretty good at this. And you will find that Arabs are very polychronic. People that live around the Mediterranean tend to be very polychronic. They're highly distractible and subject to interruptions. So they will jump from one task to another. Deadlines do not necessarily have much, if any, meaning. They consider time commitments more casually. They will complete one meeting they have, even though they know they have another meeting that's scheduled to start. And people just flow with this. They're very committed to people rather than tasks. And they do borrow and lend things often. In fact, if you were to basically observe something an Arab person had in their office and you kept commenting on how beautiful it was, they would probably feel necessary to give it to you. They build long-time relationships. And when you're dealing with people that are very polychronic, one of the things you normally have to do is build a relationship with them before you can even build a business relationship with them. And they would expect you to stay with that company and work with them in the future. They would not expect to have somebody else come in and replace you. Proxemics is space and how people use space. In the United States, we have an intimate zone which is about 18 inches. We will let people we know, like family or very good friends, into this space. Our social zone, or for those that are acquaintances, people we might be at parties with, in class with, we like them to be 4 to 12 feet away. Basically, we don't want them to be able to easily touch us. And then we have a public distance, which is over 12 feet. Basically, people we don't know, we don't want them to have any ability to possibly touch us. In our use of office space, you can see this because we like to basically make people not be able to come near us. We put a desk between us and the door. We put people on the other side of that desk when we talk to them, so that no physical contact is really permissible. While you'll find in other offices in the world that basically they may be sitting in the middle with all their subordinates around them, or they may actually sit with all their subordinates. There may actually be no room. Oculesics is eye contact, and this is a very different one around the world. In the United States, we like direct eye contact. We want somebody to look at us. If they don't look at us, then we feel they may be lying to us. They may be hiding something from us. We don't like it. In other cultures, it is actually expected you will show respect by not giving someone direct eye contact. And in many cases, like in Arab countries, men do not look women in the eyes as a show of respect. Same with China. Or people, if they have to give you bad news, may look away. They may not say they can't do something, but in their averting their eyes, they're saying they can't do something. So direct eye contact and indirect eye contact is very important around the world. And learning these differences from different countries will help you really understand what the people are saying versus what you might think they're saying. Olfactics is smell. And this is a very interesting one, because if you've traveled much, one of the things you notice when you first get off of an airplane is that things smell different. And it's because of what the people eat, what the vegetation smells like, and in general, just your surroundings in general. So foods, what we eat, make us smell different. Basically, many Easterners eat a lot of vegetables and not a lot of meat in their diets. So many times they actually think U.S. Americans smell because we put off a certain odor because of the amount of meat that's in our diets. Also, perfumes give off a lot of odors, and the perfumes vary from country to country. And hygiene. Some countries are known for taking 3 showers a day, and others are known for maybe not doing it once a month. And then there's the vegetation. Vegetation differs all over the world. And basically, that vegetation has smells. And it changes our whole perception of what an area is like. So smell is a very interesting variable. Haptics is touch. And haptics is an interesting phenomenon because some countries are very touch-oriented to the point of hugging, and others are very non-touch. It's one of the reasons you have handshakes, you have bows, you have namaste. In India, you have many different greetings. And basically that greeting will tell you a lot about touch in that country. Men and women different. Basically, in some countries, it's okay for men and women to hug, to shake hands. In other countries, such as Arab countries, men and women may not have any contact. So you have to find out beforehand what kind of greetings you're going to have. If you go to Russia, you go to France, you're going to kind of get, in France, it'll be kind of what I call the air kiss. You'll get an air kiss on each cheek, and they kind of hold you by your shoulders. If you go to Russia, you're just going to get a big bear hug. And these differences you need to know are going to happen so you don't retreat from them, because that would be seen as being offensive, like you didn't trust them or something. So you need to learn these things before you travel anywhere in the world. Facial expressions. Many different meanings to this little gesture of facial expressions. Things such as smiles. A lot of people in the Far East will smile when they're embarrassed. They don't smile to indicate just happiness. And here we tend in the U.S. to smile for happiness. Or we may smile kind of laughing at ourselves if it's a joke on us. Many countries you don't really see the laughing or the smiling unless you go out and have drinks with the people. You get away from an office environment. Germans are known for not having any kind of laughter or smiling that goes on basically in the office. When you're in the office, you're supposed to be serious and working. So as you go from country to country around the world, these facial expressions that we sometimes take for granted have many, many different meanings, and they're not always the same. One of the things you'll hear Japanese do is a little hissing sound, and all that means is that they're listening. But if you don't know what that hissing sound means, you may be kind of confounded as to what's actually going on. And does frowning mean they don't understand, or that they're listening to you? Again, it's something that can have many different meanings around the world. Colors, chromatics, is another one that's particularly useful to know, particularly if you're buying gifts. Because in many countries, the colors that you wrap your gift in are as important as the gift itself. In fact, in many countries, the paper and actually the time you take to wrap your gift is as important as what you give. Black and white are particularly interesting colors because they have kind of generic meanings in the United States. We kind of take white for purity and black for the dark side. And we use black for funerals, whites for weddings. And when you go to other countries, this is not always the case. In fact, in Japan, red is worn for funerals, and white is worn for funerals. And you need to be careful about what colors you wear, because somebody may come up to you if you're wearing white and say, I'm so sorry for your loss. And you're going to look at them like, what loss? So you need to know these things ahead of time. Purple is another very interesting color because it's generally, in years, centuries past, has always been used for royalty. And in fact, at certain times in history in certain countries, people, the basic people, couldn't even wear the color purple. So you need to think about chromatics and what these colors actually mean. There's been a study with other United Nations people wanted to find out basically what multinational companies based in Japan and the United States wanted. What kinds of things did they find that caused problems? And some of those directly relate to some of these items we've just talked about. One was country legislation, especially employment law, which varies so much from country to country. And these laws are very important. Varying regulatory frameworks. We just don't have the same laws. So it's important to find lawyers or someone in that country who are willing to work with you. And different media landscapes. What we have on TV in the United States or on our billboards is very different than what Arab countries, Japan, or France might have on their billboards. And language. Language is how we think. And it is very much a difficulty because you can't always translate a given statement into any other language. Sometimes the words just don't exist. Time zones are a problem, and learning how to deal with those time zones. It's a lot better now because you don't have just telephone. You have email, so you can send messages to people in other countries when they're sleeping, and when they wake up, they can answer your messages. So it helps somewhat, but there are times when everybody needs to talk together, and these time zones do become a problem. Non-U.S. business models. Every country in the United States does not operate the way we do in the United States, and this becomes particularly a problem. Different business customs. As I mentioned earlier, in some countries you've got to have a relationship with someone before you can do business with them, and they would expect you to continue working for your company and to continue interacting with them for years. Most people in most other countries do not switch companies or work positions as often as we do in the United States. It's a complex range of stakeholders and audiences, particularly when you have your company split up among different countries in the world. You're going to be dealing with many different people who think differently, and you have to learn how to deal with all of those stakeholders. And then local leaders' personalities. The leaders, the business leaders, the governmental leaders vary very much around the world. So there's an awful lot to learn before you can successfully move to another country and do business. And then there's always the skeletons in the cupboard, the things that have happened in the past that affect what are going on in today's world. Because unfortunately, there are a number of cultures in the world where they never forget. They still harbor about things that happened centuries ago. You know, my family did this to your family, and therefore, and it just goes on. It may be very helpful to you to make a copy of this business communication model before you go on, because this managerial communication model is basically what I'm going to be talking about for the next few slides. And if you keep this kind of picture with you, it'll help you understand how communication flows. Basically, you've got the macro environment, and that's going to be your organizational communication in your situational context, within which all communication takes place. And then you've got your micro environment, which is your information source, your encoding, your message channel, your decoding, your destination, your feedback. And it's all the things that the people do inside of this individually. First, we're going to talk about the macro environment, the organizational culture, and the situational context, because these are the two that set the stage for all communication that go on in your organization. Basically, the organizational culture includes the behaviors that develop, and these are a culture of shared values, symbols, meanings, practices, customs and traditions, history, tacit understandings, habits, norms, expectations, common meanings, rights, and shared assumptions that have grown up within this organization. Ole Miss has an organizational culture. You know what it is. People are here to learn, but they're also here for a certain amount of socializing. The Grove is very important to the people who generally go to this university undergraduate. Other firms also have a macro environment. And as you move from firm to firm, one of the things you will notice is how this organizational culture is very different from one organization to another. And it very much determines how communication takes place within that organization. Basically, it's very difficult if you're not tied into the organizational culture to ever be successful. So one of the early things you need to do is find someone who can kind of tell you and lead you through what the organizational culture is, who you can talk to, who you can trust, who you shouldn't talk to, you know, which groups have the upper hand, who have the power in the organization, and just how you should approach people. The situational context, on the other hand, is while your particular communication is going on. It basically is, where are you? Are you in an office? Are you outdoors? Are you traveling on a plane? And the situation involves things like gender, age, cultural differences, whether you're a subordinate, an equal, or a superior in relationship. And again, it's one of those things that's going to vary. If you have a very management X type of company, as a subordinate you wouldn't say much. And as a manager, you might not tell your subordinates very much. However, if you have a very open management style Z company, basically what you're going to do is feel free to go to anyone and talk to them about anything. So this organizational culture and this situational context completely describes or controls how communications take place within an organization. When it comes to the microenvironment, some of these are very quick to define and explore. The one that's going to be very long is barriers. So we're going to do some separate slides on barriers. But the information source is simply the person or group that starts a communication. So they start some kind of a message. And the message is the information they want the receiver to act upon. The encoding process by this information source is the words, it's the message that they want to relay. And basically, the words they choose should have something to do with the group they're talking to. Their age, their economic level, their educational level, and culture. And then they have to decide how they're going to send that message. And that's the channel or the media. It's called both. And basically the message is what you want the person to then do. And the channel is simply how that message is going to travel. And it can be written, it can be an email, a memorandum, a letter, a text. It can also be verbal, telephone. It can be social media. It can be a fax. It can be face-to-face. It can be in a meeting. It can be in a company newspaper. These are all examples of channels. And with technology and the improvements in technology, these channels have gotten very blurred as to whether they're spoken or they're written or a combination of both. The more nonverbal inputs you have and verbal inputs, the easier it is for somebody to interpret your message correctly. So the strongest kind of channel is face-to-face. The least strong channel is going to be email, memorandum, texting, things that are just written, where you lose all of those personal nonverbals that we talked about earlier. So channel selection can be very important depending on what your message is and how important it is that you have things like feedback. Now, decoding is the opposite of encoding. The receiver of your message has to take your message and through their own filters decide what it is you're trying to tell them or ask them to do. And as they decode it, they can only do that from their point of view, from their centrism, from what they have learned in the past. Just as when you put the message together, the only thing you had to use was everything that had happened to you in your past. The destination is that receiver. So the person receiving it has to decide what it is you're saying. And this is where barriers come into effect. And there are many barriers that happen either from the person that starts this conversation, this communication, how they encode it, the channel they choose, the decoding, and the receiver. The first barrier we're going to talk about is going to be physical and psychological. The next barrier is a language barrier. And it is unfortunate, but the language we learn controls our thought processes and our mindset and how we interpret what somebody else is saying. So if someone is not speaking English, for example, as a first language, they may interpret what you're saying very differently from the way you meant it. And even if they're speaking English, there's 18 varieties of English spoken in the world. So you may not understand each other because of different meanings for words in different Englishes. So knowing what language barriers may happen, not being able to translate a sentence directly but having to translate it indirectly can cause people to have problems understanding you. The next one is gender barriers. And women and men simply do not think alike. Women and men have very different ways of communicating. Some people prefer a male boss. Some prefer a female boss. Because what people have found is that there is a difference between these two in how they ask to have things done, how they treat people, their ability to empathize. And as more and more women are entering the workforce, there's actually less job delineation. What used to be considered female jobs, men can do now, and what used to be considered men's jobs, women are doing now. So there's lots of different things about the genders that you have to learn, particularly if you are managing one or the other genders. A couple of examples. I have a good friend who is an insurance agency, and he deals in claims. He has about 100 women that report to him, because it seems to be mainly women like this job. One thing he found very early on, if he's going to say good morning to one, he has to say good morning to all of them. Because if he doesn't, the ones he doesn't say good morning to, their feelings are hurt. Because they then think he likes the other people better than they. When I first started at Quaker Oats, I was in charge of inventory control. And I had 7 different warehouses around the country, and I had all males at those. And they were anywhere from about my age to my father's age. I had to deal with them differently. Because number one, they'd never had a female supervisor before. And number two, I had age differences. And it made for some very interesting times. But you can learn. And one of the main things I would say, if you're dealing with all males or all females and you're the opposite, you need to do a little research on male and females and how they differ. Next, we're going to talk about educational levels. And basically, education levels come into importance in your word choice and how you talk to someone. Someone with a high school degree right now probably has less than an 8th grade reading level, which means their vocabulary is going to be at an 8th grade level. And one thing in business that's always been very apparent to me, your $100 words, probably this isn't a good place to use them. Use words that are very acceptable and very easily understood by everyone. And then you won't get into problems. You can save the $100 words for when you're writing the annual report, when you're giving a presentation to your board, things such as this. The next one that is particularly difficult is generational differences. And basically, in today's workforce, we have 4 groups of people who are working currently. We have traditionalists who were born between 1925 through 1945. We have the baby boomers, who were 1946 through 1965. We have the Gen Xers, who were 1966 through 1979. And we have the millennials, who are 1980 through 1999. And we are about to have a new group in a few years, and they will be yet different from these groups. There are many intergenerational issues, and particularly when it comes to communication, and basically because of technology. Your traditionalists are going to be the ones that like the face-to-face communication. You have to remember, many of these people did not even grow up with telephones, and they like that face-to-face. And here on the other end, you've got the millennials, who would just soon use texting all the time and never talk to anyone. These people have to work together. So one of the things you have to face, particularly if you're a traditionalist, is how do you communicate? How much technology are you going to learn so that you can easily talk with these people? One of the things I find very interesting is many people are getting on email and Facebook and social media because of their grandchildren, because that's how those grandchildren communicate. And if they really want to know what's going on in their life, they do this. It's the same in the business world. If you are going to communicate with each other, you've got to learn how each other prefers to communicate and then work on opening up some of your methods of communicating. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult. But it's important with all these multi-generational staffs that you learn to communicate in different ways and realize you're not going to reach everyone in the same way. And the last thing I want to talk about is feedback. And the feedback loop is your way of making sure communication is understood. So anytime you are given a project to do by your boss, or you give someone else a project to do, either they or you or both, hopefully, will start a feedback loop and ask questions to make sure everything is completely understood and that there are no problems. One of the things you would not want to do is go off and do a study and give your boss a 20-page report, and they start reading it and they go, well, this wasn't really what I wanted to know. You know, this is what I wanted to know. It's a little late at that point. Now you've got to start over and do the whole project. So always asking some questions early on is very important in this communication cycle. Improving the communicative process. Messages fail because of three things: framing effects, illusion of control, and discounting the future. Basically, framing effects talk about the way we deal with problems. And basically, it's when a decision is influenced by the way the problem or issue is phrased. So sometimes we'll actually cause a problem by the way in which we ask a question. We may not actually ask the question directly, and we always need to do this. And there is this illusion that we do have control, and that whatever we say, people are going to understand. But that's only true about 70% of the time. About 30% of the time, managers will frame a question in such a way that their subordinates actually do not understand what they're talking about. And then the other one is discounting the future. And you use tactics that lead to a preference for a short-term benefit over a longer-term benefit. And this is particularly problematic when you're dealing with people from other cultures. And if you're a short-term person and they're a long-term person, it becomes very difficult for the two of you to communicate because you're communicating past each other rather than communicating together. So use this communication model to dissect not only your own approach to communications, but also your subordinates and your superiors' ways of communicating. The more you learn to decipher and understand other people, the easier it will be for you to communicate and work with them and get things done in your organization that will help your organization go to the future.